It was one of those bright Saturday mornings where everything just feels right. The air was crisp, coffee in hand. I was ready to take my truck out for a quick grocery run before heading to the lake. But as I walked down my driveway, that perfect morning came to a screeching halt. There it was. A shiny, obnoxiously loud red sports car parked right across my driveway, blocking me completely. Its front bumper was kissing the edge of my curb, and the back wheels were nearly touching my mailbox. And I didn't need to check twice to know whose car it was. It belonged to Karen's son, Chad. Now, if you've ever met an HOA Karen, you already know, they think the entire neighborhood is their personal kingdom. And Karen was the queen of this one. Her son, Chad, was a 22-year-old college dropout who treated his loud car like a trophy and everyone else's property like a racetrack. ID caught him revving down our street at 2 a.m. more times than I could count, and each time I complained, Karen would say, "Boys will be boys." Well, this boy was about to meet a man with limits. At first, I tried to be calm. I took out my phone and snapped a few pictures, making sure the license plate, driveway, and "no parking" sign ID installed years ago were visible. Then, I knocked on Karen's door. She opened it with her usual fake smile. "Oh, hi there," she said, her voice dripping with sugar and venom. "Karen," I started evenly, "your son's car is blocking my driveway again. I need to get out." She rolled her eyes, waving me off like a child. "He's just dropping off something for me, don't make a big deal out of it. He'll move in a bit." "A bit?" I repeated. "I've got places to be." "Well," she said with that smirk she always wore when she thought she'd won, "you'll just have to wait. It's not the end of the world." That was it. No apology. No effort to fix it. Just that smug look that made my blood boil. I walked back home and called the tow company, something I'd done twice before, and every time, Karen would make a scene. But as I waited, something clicked in my head. Tow trucks took too long, and honestly, this wasn't about inconvenience anymore. It was about respect. I decided to play it differently this time. I grabbed my lawn sprinkler and positioned it directly in front of Chad's car. Then, I hooked up the hose to my pressure washer. If his car wanted to block my driveway, it was about to get the deepest wash of its life. As I blasted the water, the high-pressure spray hit his freshly waxed hood and sent dirt, gravel, and tiny bits of mud flying everywhere. I wasn't scratching it, yet, but it sure wasn't showroom shiny anymore. By the time the water settled, the car looked like it had gone mudding in the woods. About 10 minutes later, I heard a loud door slam. "What the hell are you doing?" Chad came storming out. The next morning, I stepped out of my house with my travel mug of coffee, whistling like nothing had happened. The air was calm, the kind of morning that gives you false hope. Because right there, across my driveway again, sat the same red sports car. Except this time, it wasn't just parked there. It was parked diagonally, taking up my entire driveway and part of my yard. A childish move, 100% Chad's doing. I clenched my jaw. My coffee didn't even taste good anymore. I walked around the car, taking photos again. But this time, something new caught my attention, a bright yellow note stuck under my mailbox with duct tape. It read in bold, messy handwriting. "Next time you touch my car, it'll touch your truck. See. Classy. Real classy." That's when my neighbor, Mrs. Jensen, an elderly woman who'd lived on the street longer than any of us, peeked over her fence. "Morning, dear," she said, her eyes twinkling like she'd seen this circus too many times before. "That boy's been out there since sunrise. Revving his engine like a peacock." I sighed. "Yeah, and his mom's probably standing by with a camera to film me losing it." Mrs. Jensen chuckled. "You boys play your games. Just don't bring the HOA down here again, I'm too old for their newsletters." Her words made me laugh, but the irritation in my chest didn't fade. I went inside, thinking, this wasn't about a driveway anymore. It was about principle. And knowing Karen, she was behind it. An hour later, my theory was confirmed when I saw the HOA president, Rick, walking up my driveway with Karen right beside him. Rick was a mild-mannered man, but whenever Karen was involved, his patience vanished faster than Wi-Fi in a thunderstorm. "Morning, folks," I said, crossing my arms. Karen jumped right in. "Rick, this is the man who's been harassing my son and damaging his property. I demand disciplinary action." I blinked. "You mean the guy who's been illegally parking on my property and threatening me?" Rick sighed. "Let's keep this civil. Karen says you sprayed his car with some sort of cleaner that ruined the paint." I pointed to my phone. "Video evidence says otherwise. It was just water. You can even see him laughing when I did it." Karen's jaw dropped. You recorded us." "Yup," I said. "It's called protecting yourself when dealing with someone who lies for a living." Her face turned the color of her son's car. Rick glanced between us, obviously regretting being dragged into this. "All right," he muttered. "This seems like a personal matter. Unless there's clear property damage, the HOA can't intervene." Karen gasped like she'd just been betrayed. "What do you mean you can't intervene? He's creating a hostile environment." Rick adjusted his glasses. "He's not the one blocking driveways, Karen. Maybe talk to your son." That was the first time I ever saw Karen speechless. She glared at me like she wanted to set me on fire, then turned on her heel and stormed off. Rick sighed again. "Try to keep things from escalating, will you?" "Oh, I'll try," I said with a thin smile. "But if he parks here again, I won't call a tow truck." Rick gave me a long look before leaving, probably wondering what that meant. That night, as the sun dipped and the street grew quiet, I noticed something odd through the blinds. Chad's car wasn't parked in front of my driveway anymore. Instead, it was sitting across the street, directly under the streetlight, facing my house. He was waiting. For what, I didn't know. But I could see his silhouette inside, a faint glow from his phone lighting up his face. He sat there for almost half an hour before driving off. That's when I decided to end this once and for all. I'd been patient. I'd warned them. But they wanted a game? Fine. I'd play. And I'd win. The next morning, I backed my truck out of the garage and noticed something shiny wedged under my rear tire, a handful of nails scattered like confetti. Luckily, none had pierced the rubber, but that was the last straw. I went straight to my garage and pulled out a few wooden stakes, rope, and my old security camera kit. If they wanted to test me, they were about to meet the upgraded version of me, one that didn't forgive or forget. By the afternoon, I'd set up 3 cameras, one aimed at my driveway, one at my yard, and one disguised in my mailbox. Then, I drove to the hardware store and bought a few gallons of biodegradable marking paint, the kind surveyors use. Non-toxic, easy to wash off, but bright as a neon sign. That night, I waited. Sure enough, around 10:45 p.m., I heard the familiar hum of Chad's car approaching. I peered out the window just in time to see him park halfway into my driveway again, grinning like a villain in a bad movie. He stepped out, looked around, and placed something shiny on my doormat, probably another threat. He didn't know I was filming every second. He didn't know that by the next morning, his red car would be blue. I smiled as I went to bed, knowing that round 3 was coming, and this time, I wouldn't need to say a word. Because when you let entitled people dig their own hole, all you have to do is hand them the shovel. By the time dawn rolled around, the street was quiet, birds chirping, sprinklers hissing, the kind of peaceful morning that makes you forget the world's full of idiots. I sipped my coffee on the porch, waiting for the show to start. And then, like clockwork, I heard the growl of Chad's red Mustang roaring down the street. He parked right where he had last night, across my driveway, as if marking territory. Then he swaggered out, wearing that same smug grin that screamed I own the neighborhood. I didn't move. I just waited. Because he didn't know that overnight, while he was busy being a wannabe tough guy, ID prepared something he'd never forget. When ID seen his car blocking my driveway for the 100th time, I took the paint, bright, electric blue marking paint, and carefully sprayed a wide perimeter around the front of my property. The ground, the edge of the curb, even the section where he always parked. To any normal person, it looked harmless. But when the morning sprinklers turned on, the paint mixed with the water and created a thin mist, coating anything nearby in fluorescent blue dust. Chad parked, walked inside his house like usual, and about 20 minutes later came back out. And that's when the magic happened. His shiny red Mustang was no longer red. It was now streaked in brilliant, blotchy blue, like a tie-dye experiment gone wrong. The look on his face was priceless. His jaw dropped so far I thought it might hit the pavement. What the hell? He shouted, spinning around in disbelief. I pretended to act surprised. Whoa, looks like someone had a wild night. Did it rain paint or something? You did this. He roared, pointing at me. You and your stupid sprinklers. I shrugged. My sprinklers have been here for years, Chad. You sure it wasn't karma? Maybe the paint gods are mad you can't park like a normal person. He stormed toward me, fists clenched, his sneakers squeaking against the pavement. But just as he was about to cross onto my property, Karen came rushing out of her house in her pink robe, her phone already recording. Chad! Don't touch him! She shrieked. I'm filming this. He's vandalizing your vehicle, we'll need this for the HOA and the police. Vandalizing? I raised an eyebrow, sipping my coffee calmly. I didn't touch his car. But since you're recording, make sure to catch this part, you're both trespassing right now. That made her hesitate. Her eyes darted from my security cameras to the paint-covered car. She knew she couldn't prove anything. Karen puffed herself up, turning the camera on me like she was conducting a full-blown investigation. This will go viral. HOA property vandalism, homeowner aggression, public intimidation. I interrupted with a smirk. Public stupidity? Her lips tightened. You think this is funny? My son's car is ruined. Then maybe he should have parked it somewhere legal, I said, stepping closer. And maybe next time you'll teach him that driveways aren't community property. Chad was still fuming, circling his now blue Mustang. You're gonna pay for this, old man. I didn't do anything, Chad. The paint's non-toxic, water-based. Give it a few days and it'll wash off, if you don't keep parking under my sprinklers, that is. Karen's eyes flickered with rage. This isn't over, she hissed, dragging her son toward the house. Can't wait, I said cheerfully, waving at the camera. But as the day went on, I realized they weren't done yet. Around lunchtime, a white sedan pulled up, an unfamiliar car with a clipboard-carrying woman stepping out. She looked around, taking photos of my lawn, my mailbox, even my truck. I walked out. Can I help you? Are you Mr. Carter? She asked. I'm with the HOA's inspection committee. We received a complaint that your lawn decorations and mailbox modifications violate Section 4B. I laughed out loud. Mailbox modifications? You mean the one with a camera inside it? She blinked. There's a camera inside? Yep. Want to see who vandalized my property? Because I have footage. Her tone softened immediately. Oh. Maybe that won't be necessary. I pulled out my phone anyway, opening the live feed. See that? I pointed to a video from last night, where Chad was placing nails by my driveway. That's your star resident right there. Maybe tell Karen she's wasting her time before I send this to the police. The inspector's face went pale. I'll report this to the board. Good idea, I said, smiling as I walked back inside. That evening, I heard shouting from across the street, Karen's voice, loud and panicked. Through my window, I saw 2 police cruisers parked in front of her house. Chad stood by his car, still stained blue, arguing with an officer. I stepped outside, pretending to check my mail, and caught bits of the conversation. "Ma'am, you can't make false vandalism claims," one officer said. "The footage your neighbor provided shows your son tampering with his property." Karen was nearly in tears. "He's lying. He's setting us up." The officer shook his head. "Actually, we verified his video timestamps with our report system. You might want to stop filing false complaints, that can lead to fines." Chad kicked the tire of his Mustang. "This is bull. Watch your language," the officer warned. Karen's face twisted with fury as she saw me standing there, hands in my pockets, smirking. "You think you've won?" she snapped. I shrugged. "Not yet. But I'm definitely ahead." The police drove off, leaving Karen glaring at me across the street. For once, she didn't have anything to say. That night, I sat on my porch watching the quiet neighborhood, a little satisfied grin on my face. It wasn't just about revenge anymore, it was about finally standing up to years of HOA bullying, manipulative neighbors, and entitled tantrums. I'd only played by their rules, but better. Smarter. Cleaner. But deep down, I knew Karen wasn't finished. And when people like her feel cornered, they don't quit. They explode. And something told me, the explosion was coming tomorrow. Morning sunlight spilled across the street like any other day, but I knew this wasn't just any morning. There was tension in the air, that eerie, electric quiet before a storm. Karen's house looked still from the outside, but I'd been around long enough to know that calm wasn't peace. It was plotting. I was right. Around 9 a.m., a tow truck rolled up in front of my house. The driver, a lanky guy in a reflective vest, knocked on my door. "Morning," he said, reading off a clipboard. "You Carter?" "Yep," I said slowly. "Got an HOA order here, claims your vehicle violates neighborhood standards and needs to be towed for inspection." I blinked. "Inspection? My truck's parked in my own driveway." He shrugged helplessly. "I just follow the order, sir." That evening, the neighborhood group chat was buzzing, screenshots, gossip, HOA drama spreading faster than wildfire. Someone had filmed the whole encounter, and the video was already circulating with the caption, "HOA president tries to tow neighbor's truck without approval, gets owned." Comments poured in from neighbors who'd been quietly rooting against Karen for months. Finally someone stood up to her. "That woman thinks she runs the town. Team Carter all the way." I thought it was over. I thought I'd finally won. But people like Karen never take defeat gracefully. Just past midnight, I woke to the sound of movement outside, quiet footsteps, the crunch of gravel. My security cameras lit up my phone screen, showing Chad and Karen sneaking toward my driveway. Chad held a can of spray paint. Karen whispered directions like a drill sergeant. They didn't realize I was watching everything live. I grabbed my phone and pressed record, zooming in as Chad crouched by my truck, shaking the can. The sound of hissing paint filled the air. He started tagging the side panels, while Karen watched nervously. And then, just as Chad finished his little act of rebellion, a blinding flash lit up the driveway, the motion sensor floodlight. Karen froze. Chad jumped like he'd been tasered. I stepped out onto my porch, robe and coffee mug in hand, like I'd been expecting them all along. Well, I said casually. "Midnight art session, huh?" Chad stammered. I wasn't." Karen straightened her shoulders. "We were just inspecting property lines." property lines on my truck?" I said, raising an eyebrow. I gestured toward the blinking red light of my camera above the garage. "Smile. You're both on candid camera." She turned pale. "You wouldn't." "Oh, I would," I said. "In fact, this footage is already backed up to the cloud. And since vandalism is a criminal offense, I'm sure Officer Daniels would love to see it." She clenched her fists. "You're bluffing. Like you bluffed the tow order?" I smiled coldly. "You're done, Karen." The next morning, 2 police cruisers arrived, this time, not for me. The officers spoke briefly to Karen, who looked completely deflated. Chad stood by the porch, head down, while the officers examined the paint damage on my truck. Officer Daniels, a friend of mine from high school, waved me over. We saw the footage. Pretty open and shut. Vandalism, trespassing, and filing false reports. "You pressing charges?" I thought about it. The weeks of harassment, the shouting, the fake fines, the paint, the driveway blockages, all of it. And I nodded. "Yeah. I am." Karen started to protest, but her voice cracked halfway through. "You can't, he's lying." I didn't. But the officers were already reading her rights. As they led her to the cruiser, she shot me a look that was pure venom. "You'll regret this," she spat. "Maybe," I said, sipping my coffee. "But at least I'll have a parking spot." By the weekend, the neighborhood was quiet again. Chad had been staying with relatives, Karen had a court date and a temporary HOA suspension. Neighbors waved at me now, stopping to chat. For the first time in years, people were smiling without looking over their shoulders. And as I stood beside my newly cleaned truck, I realized something: the battle wasn't just about a parking spot. It was about standing up to people who think rules only apply to everyone else. I chuckled to myself, shaking my head. Guess the HOA finally got some justice. Then, glancing at Karen's empty driveway, I added under my breath. "Could have just parked right, Karen."